arrangements which have done a great injury to the development of the industry, and those of you who are here may have an idea what I'm speaking about. And I'll come to that when I speak about procurement. On the 24th of April 2012, we wrote to the Prime Minister in great detail, outlining a lot of our concerns about what we saw as corruption and certain issues concerning corruption in the country, emerging issues. And we haven't had a response in a timely fashion. We were quite disappointed with that. We eventually met with the Prime Minister, I can recall, on 17th of September 2012. And it was a good discourse. And of course that discussion was animated by the whole eruption of public concern over Section 34. We regarded Section 34, we made a press release on the 11th of September 2012. We regarded Section 34 as a sort of an attempt at some kind of a loophole for people who may have been accused of corrupt acts. And what we'd like to say about that, we don't have time, I only have a few minutes for my remarks. What we'd like to say about that point is that if indeed the government, this government wins the election, or Dr. Rawi's party wins the election, if indeed the government would like to change the laws with respect to corruption and white-collar crime, and that is a prerogative of any government in a democracy, if indeed that is what the government would like to do, our position is we'd like those laws changed to make it tougher on white-collar criminals. We don't want any changes to the laws about fraud and corruption and bribery and prevention and Proceeds of Crime Act. If you're changing those laws, make them tougher. Talk about gangs, legislation about gangs. There are a lot of different kinds of gangs. We need to deal with it. Okay? Very serious situation in the country. And of course, we come to the epic. You know, we're in a season where the sort of the laugh way, the road march is about accountability and transparency and good governance, and it doesn't matter which party you listen to, that's what you hear. That's the song everybody is singing. But the one that sticks out for us, the last point I mentioned, is the Beetham water recycling project, where we had to bounce again at Victor's point. Victor's first point was about us needing to get more consultation. And in fact, we're not prepared to accept that a huge project could be developed behind closed doors, and is not mentioned in the budget, and is not mentioned anywhere, and it sort of slips on by. We protested like hell when it was Mr. Patrick Manning doing it. We made our protests when the current administration is doing it, and we just want to say again that we don't consider that acceptable. So those points that we mentioned, if indeed the People's Partnership is returned to government after the election, we would want those points to be seriously reconsidered. I want to change gear here. I want to speak clearly because, again, integrity requires we speak to both sides of the coin. I want to speak of the most important legislative change. In our belief, the Public Procurement and Disposal of Public Property Act is the most important act in the country after the Constitution. That's the position we took, because it is tackling in an organized fashion the large-scale corruption that has become involved in our business of construction and real estate and property and so on, where public money is concerned. And I'd like to appreciate publicly, I'd like to record our appreciation for the support we have had. We didn't get everything we wanted, but we had significant support from the current administration to get this law passed by Parliament and assented to by the President. At the moment, there's a transitional process. Again, he seems to be getting a lot of mentions this afternoon, but my colleague Victor is on the transitional committee, Victor Hart, which is working very hard to put the correct regulations in place and put the correct arrangements in place. It's too detailed to go into now. But we would like to take the opportunity to call on the Prime Minister that, in fact, let us get those regulations in place. Let us urge all speed on our colleagues. Let's get the regulations in place. Let's get the arrangements in place. Let's get this law proclaimed, even if it's a partial proclamation. Let's do the un-Trinidadian thing and finish something we started. Let's finish it with quality. Let's put something there for the next generation. So again, expressing my appreciation for the support on the public procurement and disposal of public property law. The next point I want to express my appreciation on behalf of my colleagues, is the question of the Planning and Facilitation of Development Act, which passed in the middle of last year. And for those of you who are not practitioners, I see some non-practitioners in the audience, so you distinguished people, but you're not practitioners in the industry that we are. The last land use plan this country had, the law required that it be passed, to be updated every 5 years. The last land use plan this country had was passed by Parliament in '84. We were 30 years behind the ball. So all of that development that we have grown up and seen, all of the junior secondaries and senior secondaries and health centers and the big buildings in town and the rest of it, was built without a strategic overview of proper land use planning, which is what gives rise to the sort of conflicts, and I'm not going to detail them, but some of the sorts of conflicts that have taken up the headlines and taken up our headspace and so on. The lack of proper strategic planning and discussion. So we are very pleased to have made progress in relation to the Planning and Facilitation of Development Act. Okay? There's a companion bill that needs to be passed, there's some regulations that need to be passed, and we need to do that to implement that important law. Victor also mentioned building codes in terms of public safety and the safety of investors and the safety of occupants. And the fundamental work is taking place. And we need to make sure that the funding is put in place, Prime Minister, and I know Minister Mulad, I'm seeing you there. Minister Mulad is under your hand as a ministerial responsibility. We need to put the funds in place to have the draft building code rolled out so that we can move to the next stage in terms of the safety of our buildings and construction in the country. Again, whoever wins the next election, we're going to be coming forward as a collective to the respective ministers seeking to get proper registration of our engineers, our architects, and seeking for the first time to have a registration system for contractors. Because I was sitting next to the special guest a few minutes ago, and she told me that it was remarkable how many new contractors there were. And I rejoined her and said, well, after every election it always happens. And that is part of the discourse. So we need to make sure nothing wrong with new people joining the ranks. We need to make sure that the work is of quality that could represent what needs to happen. The final point I would make relates to the whole question of public information and education. I started off on the education front and how we need to become a learning society and how a learning society behaves. You take account of what has happened. As surveyors, we measure what has happened, you compare it with other experiences, you make an analysis and you get some learning. And I want to make a point related to the Commissions of Inquiry Act. We've had a long history in this country of Commissions of Inquiry, and there are two problems with that. The first problem is that many of the reports never get published. So we've never seen the Pianco report, and we've never seen this report and that report. They remain kind of urban legends. People say they've seen it. They promise to show me a copy. They never get to my house, and so on and so on. And the other problem in the Commissions of Inquiry is that, in fact, when the Commission of Inquiry is taking place, because of how small the penalties are about $2,000 for refusing to appear. Because of how minuscule those penalties are in comparison to the size of the financial crimes. Not all the Commissions of Inquiry are about financial crimes. But because this fine is so comparatively small, people can decide, as they very well please, not to attend the inquiry. Okay. And we've had it on all inquiries that has stained the effort. The inquiry is a lawful attempt to find out what went wrong about a matter of high public concern. And we would like to suggest to the Prime Minister, if the partnership should win the election, we made the same suggestion to Dr. Rowley on the 30th of June. We would like to suggest urgently that Commission of Inquiries Act needs to be amended, and there need to be serious penalties up to and including imprisonment for refusing to appear at a Commission of Inquiry. And that's a very serious situation. We know that in fact, if you refuse to appear in court, I'm not a lawyer, we have learned people here, but it's considered to be contempt of court. And it's a very serious thing. You go to prison for that. Very easily you go to prison. They send for you and you don't come, you go to prison. So what happens to the Commission of Inquiries? The Commission of Inquiries is about hundreds of millions, tens of millions, like a calypso. And you could just know that we want that to stop. We need to get proper information to put our country on the right track. We need to behave like educated people. We appreciate the opportunity for the discourse. I thank you for your attention. I look forward to a stimulating, robust